Hello, this is Dr. David Drozik. I'm here to encourage you to be like the Blue Zones so that you can live long and live well. I teach at Ohio University Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine, and I practice medicine at Memorial Health System out of Marietta, Ohio. If you want to see the science behind this presentation, email me and I'll send you a link to the PowerPoint. In the notes are all the references so you can look at the original study. I want to give you a warning as we get started. We will be talking about diet, calories, weight, and nutrition, and most importantly, you might find your beliefs challenged. My favorite author, N.T. Wright, likes to say that about 80% of what he says is true and 20% is not. The problem is he doesn't know which 20% is incorrect, or obviously he would fix it. So I'm going to say a similar thing, and I'm on a journey. I am learning as well. So you might find some of the things that I tell you turn out to be false. Feel free to let me know. I'd like to learn. But I want you to explore the evidence for yourself. A good starting place is lifestylemedicine.org, which is the website for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And if you like science, nutritionfacts.org is another great place to go. I'd like to start with sharing my story. I was a busy surgeon, I hit my 50s, and I went to see my primary care doc. I knew I was overweight, and I had heartburn. I was taking some over-the-counter medication for that. But to my surprise, I found out I had prediabetes and high cholesterol and high blood pressure. My doctor did what most doctors do. He pulled out his prescription pad and wrote me a prescription for some medicine. He put me on Janumet, which is a combination medication to treat diabetes, and I had diarrhea from that, as many people do. He put me on Crestor, which is a statin to control the cholesterol, and I, like about 20% or 1 in 5 people who take it, had some pretty significant muscle cramps. He said, I'll hold off and give you something for blood pressure later. This is enough medicine for now, and we know that blood pressure medicines also have lots of side effects. And I was also taking a medicine for heartburn, that proton pump inhibitor like omeprazole, the purple pill that you can get over the counter. And now we know that those contribute to the development of osteoporosis, that softening of the bones, and kidney disease and dementia. So who knows what those were doing to me at this point. He said nothing about diet or exercise, but I knew I should probably quit drinking my Dr. Pepper and quit eating my Snickers bars every day. I'd heard about this Mediterranean diet, that it was a good diet, so I thought, well, I'll give that a try. So I had skim milk on my cereal for breakfast and low-fat yogurt with fruit for lunch, and we shifted away from red meat and ate chicken or fish for our evening meals. When I went back to see him a couple months later, I had lost 5 pounds, and I thought, well, certainly things have to be better. Cholesterol was better, but at the cost of the side effects of the muscle cramps from the medication. Blood pressure hadn't budged, and the prediabetes was progressing. I was discouraged. I thought certainly we were going to turn that around. I didn't want to have diabetes. So I resigned to declining health and said, I'm going to do the best I can to stave off diabetes as long as I can. And then my life was changed in May 2011. Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who had been chief of surgery at Cleveland Clinic, came to Athens, where I live, to speak. He was promoting his documentary, Forks Over Knives, which I'd recommend for you if you're interested in this. He took end-of-the-stage heart disease patients at Cleveland Clinic who had had their stents and their bypasses and there wasn't anything else that could be done. They were put on medications and they were told to go home and make the most of it, that they had 1 to 2 years to live. Well, instead, Dr. Esselstyn invited them into a study and he put them on a plant-based whole food diet, and their arteries opened up. 20 years later, most are alive and well and highly functional in society, and they're featured in his documentary. And he said, by the way, they lost weight, their diabetes got better, their blood pressure got better, their cholesterol improved, they got off all their medicines, and they're well. That got my attention. I'd already been through the stages of change mentally. I just needed to know what to do. I was ready to do whatever the science directed me. So I spent a little time reading up on this and found out that it was true, and I made the changes, and now today I've lost over 30 pounds and kept it off for 10 years now. The heartburn is gone. I can bring it back if I have cheese or coffee. Blood pressure is cured. No medication. My cholesterol is well below normal without medication. My prediabetes is gone without medication. So I'd like to ask the question to you, do we have a problem? And the answer is definitely. We have this epidemic of chronic lifestyle-related diseases, many of those that I shared with you that I had. Over 3/4 of our population has at least one of these if we include overweight. They're 7 of the 10 leading causes of death, and they account for 90% of our healthcare spending. So here's the short list. Cardiovascular disease, which causes heart attacks and strokes, our number one killer, and the things that lead to those, such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, overweight and obesity, diabetes. Then many of our common cancers, that heartburn I had, autoimmune disease, arthritis, anxiety, depression, the list goes on. But what do we normally do about this in medicine? We are taught to manage these diseases, not to reverse them. I'd like to give you some good news and introduce you to a different paradigm. In our lifestyle medicine community, we like to use the illustration of a sink that's clogged up and the water's running and spilling over onto the floor. That water on the floor is where we concentrate with our conventional medicine. We use our pills and our procedures to mop up the high blood sugars, the clogged arteries, which are the result of the disease, not the cause of it. In lifestyle medicine, however, we unclog the drain and turn off that water. So I'd like to introduce you to a better way today for many people with these chronic lifestyle-related diseases, and that's the specialty of lifestyle medicine. It's been around about 16 years now, and instead of pills and procedures, our tools are a predominantly plant-based diet, physical activity, stress management, control of those unhealthy substances, meaningful relationships, and healthy sleep. So let me ask the question, what is the optimal lifestyle to live long and well? Well, Dan Buettner was sent into the world by National Geographic in 2019 to find out where people live the longest and the healthiest. He found 5 of these areas called the Blue Zones, and they're all around the world, different genetic backgrounds, so you can't claim it's just genetics that make the difference. And he found that the people in the Blue Zones lived on average into their mid-90s, and many of them lived into their hundreds. And they had this concept we call health span. So they had functional capacity. That's the ability to do the things you want to do in life, to get your clothes on, to go out and be active, to be able to cook your own meals, things like that. They're able to do those well into their 90s, and then when it comes time to die, they die rather quickly. Here in the U.S. instead, we have this decline in our functional capacity as we get older, and maybe at age 40, 50, 60, we hit this steep decline where we become spectators of life rather than participants of life. And many people spend that last 5, 10, 15 years of their lives in a nursing home. Well, let's look at these Blue Zones and see what they have in common. Maybe we can learn something from them that we can apply to our own lives. So the first factor is that they all eat a high carbohydrate diet. Most of these are grain-based. One is sweet potato-based. So what is it with carbohydrates? Well, not all carbohydrates are created equal. Today we hear a lot about these low-carb diets. They've been around a long time. They just get recycled with new names. Let's look at a couple of these, starting with the paleo diet, our ancestral diet. Supposedly, it's what our ancestors are supposed to eat, who are hunters and gatherers, and it's really heavy in meat. However, Jane Goodall says the true paleo diet was quite different. Now, the average American eats about 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day. Fiber comes from plants. Our paleo ancestors ate over 100 grams of fiber a day. Our ancestral diet was actually more like what the chimps eat today. Only about 2 to 5% of the diet was animal products. Then we have the keto diet. The ketogenic diet does provide some short-term improvements, weight loss being the one that most people are attracted to. However, this weight loss is predominantly water and protein, not the fat that most people want to lose. You also get some improvement in blood sugar levels, and those lipids, those blood fats that are one of the factors that leads to heart attacks and strokes. There are some possible long-term benefits for children with epilepsy that can't be controlled with medication, and there's some small studies that hint that maybe some people with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or glaucoma would also benefit from a ketogenic diet. However, the studies have shown that long-term use of these ketogenic diets actually increases the risk of diabetes, heart disease, such as heart attacks and strokes, many cancers, fatty liver disease, chronic kidney disease, osteoporosis, which is softening of the bones, and death from any cause. Those low-carbohydrate diets in general increase the risk of diabetes and increase all-cause death. However, if you substitute the animal products in these diets with plant-based foods, the death rate from heart disease and any cause actually improves. So let's take a short stroll through history. We've known this for a long time, but it seems that we've forgotten it and need to relearn it. Dr. Rabinowitz in Montreal, Canada, was intrigued by some of the studies coming out about using diet to control diabetes. He had 150 of his patients with diabetes that he had followed for about 5 years, having good records of their insulin needs and their blood sugar levels, and he switched them from a low-carb to a high-carb diet. And he found that actually they improved. Their need for insulin went down and their blood fats improved. He said it's necessary to change the way we think about diabetes. Carbohydrates actually improve the disease, whereas fats are the problem. Dr. Kempner began his rice diet at Duke University, where he took people into a residential center who had advanced diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease. Many of them had eye disease and kidney disease related to these as well, and other patients were overweight. He put them on a diet of white rice, sugar, fruit juices, low fat, meaning no animal fat, no cholesterol, and a very low sodium diet. He found that he was able to reverse their diseases, even improve the kidney disease and the eye disease, despite all the damage that had been done. And just to give you something visual to see, he was able to help people lose weight on this high carbohydrate diet. So the question is, do we want to just manage disease, or do we actually want to reverse the disease? In the 70s, Dean Ornish was able to actually reverse coronary artery disease, that clogged artery of the heart that leads to heart attacks, with a plant-based diet, physical activity, and stress management. As I already mentioned to you, Dr. Esselstyn was able to show the clogged arteries opening up on those angiogram x-rays, as well as improving high blood pressure, diabetes, and overweight in the same process. So the question in medicine is, do we want to simply manage disease, or do we actually want to reverse it? Well, our single largest healthcare expense in the United States is from diabetes. At least 15% of the population has it. Many people don't even know it. But beyond that, there's an epidemic of prediabetes. More than 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, and most of them don't even know it. And nearly a quarter of our teens and young adults also have prediabetes. Prediabetes is not pre-disease. It should really be called stage 1 diabetes. If you have it, you're already developing heart disease and blood vessel disease and eye and nerve and kidney disease, and most of these people will go on to have full-blown diabetes. However, the thing we fail to realize, and many of our doctors are guilty of this as well, is that diabetes is reversible. With a proper diet and weight reduction, the majority of people with diabetes can reverse the disease, not just manage it. So we look back at the Blue Zones. What else can we find out about them? We find that they eat legumes, beans, peas, and lentils on a regular basis. There was a study of people who had prediabetes, high blood pressure, and were overweight. Half of them were told to eat 500 calories less a day. That's like skipping a meal. The other group were told to eat a cup of beans a day, 5 days a week, and they didn't have to make any other changes. At the end of the study, those who ate the beans did just as well with losing weight, controlling their blood pressure, and controlling their blood sugars as those who ate 500 calories less, because the beans, being high in fiber, being plant-based, were actually beneficial. They worked almost as medicine. In addition, the people in the blue zones eat only, on average, one small portion of meat a week. So it's not a big steak on a platter. It's maybe some chicken or fish diced up, mixed in with their brown rice. And none of them eat cow's dairy. There's some goat cheese, but it's sprinkled on as a condiment. Let's look at the only blue zone in the United States. This is in Loma Linda, California, where there's a high population of Seventh-day Adventists. Seventh-day Adventists are a Christian denomination. They take very seriously the teachings in the Bible. In particular, they follow the dietary laws of the Old Testament, so they don't eat pork. They tend not to smoke or drink alcohol. And they're encouraged to eat a Garden of Eden diet, which is a plant-based diet, because they believe that that will be the eternal state. Well, over 150,000 Adventists who were well were entered into a study and followed for 25 years. One of the things they followed was their dietary habits. So not everybody eats totally plant-based, but about 8% eat a completely plant-based or vegan diet. Now, this was a healthy vegan diet, not French fries and Oreo cookies. We'll talk about that more in a couple minutes. About 28% added eggs and dairy to that. About 10% added fish to that. And about 5 to 6% ate kind of like a Mediterranean diet, like I had been eating. And about half of them were eating more of a standard American diet, with a strong influence to eat lots of plants and, of course, to avoid pork. What we found after 25 years was over here in the green are the people eating completely plant-based, and as you move up, you see an increase in the animal products, and only the people eating the plant-based diet, both for women and men, had normal weight. As people ate more animal products, which are more concentrated in calories, the weight went up. That's not surprising, since we know that fiber fills you up and takes up space, decreases the calories that you need to eat to feel full. But more interesting is what happened with diabetes. We found less than 2% of those eating a completely plant-based diet developed type 2 diabetes. As you increase the animal products, the rate of diabetes went up to about 7%. I already told you here in the U.S., where people eat the standard American diet, the SAD diet, there's about at least 15% with diabetes. Here in Southeast Ohio, where I live, it's closer to 30% of our adults with full-blown diabetes. Well, what's going on? The risk factors for diabetes, shown from many other studies, are things like processed meats, which were associated with an increased risk of diabetes by about 50%. Eating meat even once a week is associated with an increased risk of 30%, and regular meat consumption doubled the risk of diabetes. Actually, eating as little as 5% of the calories from an animal-based protein was associated with an increased risk of diabetes by about 30%. That's less than a skinless chicken breast a day. Even one egg per week was associated with a measurable increase in risk for diabetes. 2 to 3 eggs per week was associated with a doubled risk, 5 eggs a week with a tripled risk of diabetes. And if somebody already had diabetes, even 1 egg a week was associated with a doubling of the risk of heart disease. We see a similar change in blood pressure. So less than 10% developed high blood pressure on a completely plant-based diet. As you add those animal products in, the risk of high blood pressure went up. So this, I want to point out, is that Mediterranean diet that I was trying. It's better than the standard diet, but there's better yet. So as I was able to move from that Mediterranean diet to a plant-based diet, my blood pressure improved, my diabetes went away, I lost a bunch of weight and got well. Same with cholesterol. Less than 4% on a plant-based diet developed high blood pressure. I would suggest this is the true genetic component. And then as people increase their animal products in their diet, the level of cholesterol went up. Now, cholesterol is a risk factor for heart disease. We want to keep that total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol in particular low. We don't need to eat cholesterol. Cholesterol only is in animal products. Our body will make the cholesterol we need in our liver. However, if you eat those animal products, we overload the body with cholesterol. And even if you eat those processed plant-based foods like olive oil and other fats, we can force our liver to make extra cholesterol. It's not just heart disease, but cholesterol is also associated with many of our common cancers. So what about protein? Some of you are probably thinking, where do I get my protein if I'm not eating animal products? Well, we only need about 5 to 10% of our calories from protein anyway, and the studies have shown that younger people who eat high-protein diets have a higher risk of cancer death. When you look at it, really, those animal products should be considered fat. And remember, fat was one of those underlying factors driving diabetes. So look at the cheddar cheese, 70% fat. Things like processed meats, 80, even higher percent fat. On the other hand, look at where you can get your protein from. Beans, 25%, broccoli, 26%. You'll get all the protein you need. Remember, you only need 5 to 10% of your calories from protein. You'll get all you need from those plant-based products without even thinking about it. So there's your protein right there. What about calcium? Don't you need dairy to get calcium? No, the answer's the same. You can get the calcium you need from beans and greens. So what's going on? What's this link between these animal products and all these diseases? The link is inflammation. Inflammation is a normal response to invasion or injury. For example, if you cut your hand, it gets red, it gets swollen, gets pus, then it heals. That's inflammation. That's normal. It's your body's response to that injury. Well, all of these animal products, when we eat them, as well as processed foods that are high in sugar and bleached flour, like the white breads and the donuts, cause inflammation at a low grade in our body. Within 20 minutes of eating any of those products, we can measure inflammation in your blood. I can take a blood specimen, we'll see your white blood count goes up and other markers of inflammation will go up. And it lasts for about 6 hours. So if you think about it, for breakfast, you have milk on your cereal, you start this inflammatory process. Before it resolves, you have your chicken salad sandwich for lunch, and that boosts that inflammation. Before it resolves, in the evening, you have pork chop and au gratin potatoes. Before the inflammation resolves, then you have ice cream or Cheetos or something like that for a snack, and you boost that inflammation again. And then you go to bed in this state of low-grade inflammation. The sleep researchers are saying that sleep time is when we repair our normal damage or wear and tear daily damage to the body. If we're going to bed in an inflamed state, we're robbing our bodies of that opportunity to repair. And over time, we're leaving 10, 15, 20 years of our lives there at the dinner table, which we could have avoided if we ate a healthier diet. So the good news is these plant-based whole foods are actually anti-inflammatory. They counteract the activity. So I encourage my patients to eat mostly these plant-based whole foods like the people in the Blue Zones and to move away from those animal products and processed foods. However, I do want to comment before we go on a vegan diet. Vegan describes what you don't eat. I'm encouraging you to eat a plant-based whole food diet. There was a study from some researchers at Harvard. They looked at a large number of people, over 200,000, who had been followed for a couple of decades to see what would happen with their health. They all started out well, and they were followed for many different health factors. One of the things was diet. And they found out that the animal products were detrimental to everybody when they looked at heart disease and diabetes, but they split out the plant-based products because they wanted to see which were healthy and which were unhealthy. So we have the unhealthy processed plant-based products, the fruit juices, the sweetened beverages, refined grains like donuts and white bread, potatoes, which are mostly French fries and potato chips, and those desserts and things. So on the other hand, they looked at the plant-based whole foods, foods that were eaten without being processed out of recognition, such as the cooked whole grains, the fruits, the vegetables, the nuts, those legumes, beans, peas, and lentils. They included vegetable oil here, which I would have put on the other side, but other than that, I'm in agreement with what they looked at. And here's what they found. So this gray line is normal risk of heart disease. This dotted line, is plant-based whole foods, and this is portions. So the more portions that somebody eats per day of those plant-based whole foods, the lower their risk of heart disease. This red line are animal products. The more animal products somebody ate, the higher their risk of heart disease. And here are those vegan foods, the highly processed plant-based foods. So the potato chips, the French fries, the donuts, things with sugar and salt and fat added, they're actually worse than the animal products in increasing the risk of heart disease. So we're not talking about a vegan diet as being healthy if it has lots of processed foods with salt, sugar, and fat. They looked at diabetes. They found the exact same thing. The more portions of these healthy plant-based foods, the lower the risk of diabetes. And here are those unhealthy plant-based foods. The more they ate, the higher their risk of diabetes. So not vegan. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about are plant-based whole foods, eating more of those, less of those animal products and processed foods. As we finish up, a couple of other things to look at in the blue zones. Another common factor is they all moved naturally. A lot of them were farmers, so they didn't really need to plan exercise. But we sit way too long, many times in front of screens, like you're probably doing right now. We need to be standing, walking, more physically active. Some people think exercise is all they need for controlling their weight or losing weight. And exercise is not a good primary strategy for weight loss or managing these diseases that we've talked about. It's helpful, but if you think about that Snickers bar that I ate, I would need to go walk an hour and a half just to burn off those excess calories, not even counting the calories I have in storage in my body and fat that I want to lose. Krispy Kreme donut, that's an hour. A can of Coca-Cola is 45 minutes. And if you think about it, the average American eats about 500 calories in excess a day. They'd need to go walk at a good pace 2.5 hours just to burn off those extra calories. So the math doesn't work. You can't count on exercise alone to help you lose weight or even maintain a healthy weight. You've got to restrict those unhealthy foods. That's why our society is getting heavier and heavier, and we're having more diabetes and more heart disease. It's really all related to our diet, and our weight is just an indicator of what's going on elsewhere in our body. So to maintain that healthy weight loss, and especially for young people, the recommendations are we need at least 30 minutes a day of vigorous activity or 60 minutes a day of moderate activity. So the other thing about blue zones is they have purpose and they live in a supportive community. So they don't go off to golf courses and spend the last years of their lives. They stay engaged in their community. They have a purpose. They seek the common good for their communities. And they have a supportive community. They are in fellowship one with another. Not and unusual if they live this way and eat this way. It's actually the common thing. And if they don't, they're unusual. So they have that community that works together. There are lots of studies that actually show the benefit of being involved in religious gatherings with a community. The immune system is better. You have a longer life, a healthier life in many ways. And then we have to consider the big picture as we finish up. Our leading cause of death and disability globally is too much salt in the diet and too little whole grains, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. That accounts for about 22% of the deaths around the world. Here in the U.S. and much of the Western world, we use lots of water, lots of our grain that could be used for food to feed animals that then we eat, causing a maldistribution of resources around the world, which also contributes to things like global warming and famine. We don't have time to go into all of that today. However, the World Health Organization is encouraging everybody around the world to eat a plant-based diet, to restrict the salt and fat, especially the saturated fats and trans fats, which come in the animal products and processed foods, and those added sugars. The United Nations recommends that we as a world need to go toward a vegan diet. And I would encourage it should be a plant-based whole food vegan diet, not an unhealthy vegan diet. For more in-depth information, you're welcome to log on to my website and see the other information I share with my patients. So as we finish, I'm going to ask, are you ready for health? I hope you are. Please email me with any questions. Thank you for your attention.